Welcome to Adventures in Accessibility, a podcast that explores the far reaches of disability, access, and inclusion, with your host, Dana Barton.
Welcome back to Adventures in Accessibility. Today's guest is John Register. John is a 4-time All-American in track and field, a U.S. Army veteran, and was named a member of the 1996 Olympic team as a hurdler. After John had a misstep during his Olympic training, he went on to become a Paralympic Silver medalist in the 2000 Paralympic Games. John uses his story as an inspirational speaker. He founded Inspired Communications and now spends his time traveling the world as an inspirational speaker. John joined the United States Olympic Committee in 2003 and developed the USOC Paralympic Military Program. His leadership insights garnered him an appointment by the U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell as one of 8 members to advise the Secretary on foreign policy issues regarding disability. He continued to serve under both Secretaries of State, Condoleeza Rice and Hillary Clinton. Welcome, John. Thanks for joining us today on Adventures in Accessibility. How are you doing?
So excited. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So for our listeners who have not had the good fortune of meeting you as I have, can you share with us just briefly about your background?
Yeah, sure. I was a world-class hurdler and ran the 400-meter hurdles, and was also a member of the United States Armed Forces, United States Army, went to the Gulf War, came back without a scratch. And then as I was training for my 3rd Olympic trials in the 400-meter hurdles, I went across a hurdle, dislocated my knee when I landed, and then 7 days later, because of poor circulation, became a member of this community called the disability community, and because I had an amputation to my left leg above the knee when I was 29 years of age. From there, I kind of retooled, got back up, and hurdled the adversity, which we can talk about what that actually means,
Sure.
And wound up winning the silver medal in the long jump in Sydney, Australia, becoming one of 2 athletes in the world at that time to have jumped over 5 meters without a leg or a knee. So that's kind of the journey story of the richest rags to riches, and a lot of other stuff has transpired since that time too.
Yeah. So tell us about your Olympic trials, before your amputation. Was that your life goal to be an Olympian, or how'd you get into that?
Yeah, that was one of the life goals. There was a friend of mine, Andrew Dudley, when I was a senior in high school. He wrote this article called The Mythical 25 Feet or something like that. And it really gave me the impetus of when I was jumping in high school to try to make an Olympic team. So that was a goal of mine. I don't know if it was the dream, so to speak, because I think I had my hands in a lot of other different things. So that was just kind of one of the areas that I wanted to excel in. So the trials happened after I ran for the University of Arkansas and graduated in 1988 and had won 4 All-American honors. And I was really trying to make the Olympic team. And my first Olympic trials was in the 110-meter high hurdles in 1988. And then the next trials were in the 400-meter hurdles in 1992. And then my 3rd Olympic trials would have been the 1996 ones, but I had the injury in 1994, so never made it to the Olympic trials, but actually made it to a Paralympic trials.
Okay. And so your injury and your amputation happened right after the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law. Do you recall how you found out about the ADA, or was it just something that was always a part of your journey once you had that amputation?
No, not at all. I didn't know anything about the ADA or the laws or people with disabilities. I became a member of the community and still didn't embrace the community as I do today, because it was always in the back of my mind. It was not really so much an us versus them, but it's like those people are so. And I was always having that conversation with myself until I became a member of the community. And it wasn't really until 2007 that when I won the Paul G. Hearn Leadership Award for creating the Paralympic Military Sport Program for the United States Olympic Committee, that I really began understanding the community as a whole, about attitudinal barriers, about physical barriers, about discrimination, about stigma, all these things that were limiting people from showing up as their best self, but having so much to offer. And I saw a disconnect between the communities. So I really got pegged into a space of disability sports advocacy, and advocacy for people with disabilities. And that's kind of my intersections that I have focused on.
Sure. So did you have a lot of barriers to physical access, once you had your amputation, or what was it like kind of re-entering the world that's really built for able-bodied individuals?
Yeah. Judy Human, I call it the kind of disability. We talk about the non-disabled world, right? Most people become disabled from that standpoint. So my whole life structure was not around disability as far as understanding the community. It was more on attitudinal barriers. It was one on attitudinal barriers. So that's what was going on. So the attitudinal barriers were really what I was focused in on, because I felt that against me when I went back to track and field. I wanted to be part of the hurdles community still, because that's what I did. I was a hurdler, but I was told, my voting rights have been suspended because I was no longer a Olympic class athlete. I'm now a Paralympic athlete, and of course they didn't have anything for Paralympian. I said, what are you talking about? I mean, all this acumen I've had, I've been a world-class athlete in the hurdles for as long as I can remember, and now you're saying I can't vote because I have one leg? So that really began my advocacy for making sure that people's voices were heard, because that was just ludicrous. I've been a part of this community, and now you're saying I'm not a part of the community just because I've lost a limb. Right. And it wasn't the entire group that said that. It was only one individual. So I don't want it to be misconstrued that was all of track and field. It was only one individual that had that attitude. But it showed me just that one person that could have that attitude. It could be more other individuals out there like that. So I really began my journey of advocating for people with disabilities.
Can you tell us more about kind of what that journey has been like in terms of advocacy?
Right. So huge imposter syndrome when I found out what this community was all about. I was at the 2007, I won the Paul G. Hearn Leadership Award for the Military Sport Program, and was engrafted into this entire amazing population, and started serving on the American Association for People with Disabilities Board of Directors, and just really kind of kept my mouth shut and listened and learned about all the different groups. And my education in this really, I'm so glad I was a part of the AAPD board, because it showed me that the community is really very stovepipe. We only are concerned with our own area of disability. So the amputees group themselves together, and then the blind kind of group themselves together, and people that have spinal cord injuries, whether it's paraplegic or quadriplegic, they kind of group themselves together. Wheelchair users group themselves together. The hearing loss community groups themselves together. So there was no kind of catch-all for the entire population, and everybody was going up to Capitol Hill fighting for their one need, and Capitol Hill was so agreeable just to give each group a little bit of money. Whereas if we went as a collective, it was absolutely more powerful, and that's what ACAT found was doing. They were getting the collective voice together. Republican, Democrat, all the groups with disability, whether the physical disability world, or it was the disability world, all is lumped in together so that we can, fight for needs, because we make up this 25% of the population base, and we want to be able to have access to everything that our non-disabled friends do. And so that's with transportation, travel in the world, jobs, job employment, and all those things we have to make sure that we have access to. And if we go up Congress to fight for those things as individual groups, we're not as effective as if we go up there together. And that's what I was really finding out about this community.
Let's talk a little bit, you've mentioned employment. What has your employment journey been like? I know that you work for yourself now, but did your disability ever come into play while you were seeking employment?
I don't believe my employment ever came into play because of my disability.
Okay.
I believe what my case is my journey's different than most because I was injured in the military, and the military community was trying to figure out what could I do and what skill sets did I still have to be gainfully employed. So I went from the military to be working for the military. And if you look at the government, right, when you look under the Obama administration, had, they wanted 7% of the government workforce to be people with disabilities, and to try to make that go into civilian population as well. Well, that was going on before the administration as well, because I was engaged in the Army's World-Class Athlete Program as a sports specialist directly after I lost my leg, and that was my first job. And because I thrived in that space and was, could walk, talk, and chew gum, and was also a member of the disability community and started to understand disability rights and those type of things, it was an easier transition when Paralympics was coming online in the United States for me to morph over into that area, because they wanted people on staff that had disabilities.
Right.
So I was in the perfect world, and because of this, I can now use this as a model for other companies and corporations to say, if you don't have diversity of thought or experiences on your team, how can you call yourself the best group in the room? You just can't do it.
Right.
And so if you don't have anybody with a disability at the table and you're a disability organization, it's like you're overseeing and sending the message that these people, whatever group I'm over, these people with disabilities, we're going to speak for them because they can't speak for themselves.
Right. So you were really able to be that voice during your time with the military and with the U.S. Paralympic Committee? Yeah,
and I think on the former, it was more of the hero syndrome. We talk about, I think they held me up to a level, wow, you overcame all this. And as I'm trying to understand what I'm overcoming, it was really hard to be in a space where everybody was looking at you like you're a victor. And I'm still feeling like, I've lost my dream of becoming an Olympic athlete.
Right.
So how am I a victor in this? So now I understand it from a total different mindset. And so working for the Olympic Committee, I started that military sport program for wounded, ill, and injured service members to use sports as a tool for their rehabilitation, just like I use it for mine. And it really took off. It took off in the Warrior Games. I went over to England and did 5 presentations at Loughborough University. I did another one at Headley Court, which is like their Walter Reed for their service members. And then Prince Harry took it on our Warrior Games and is now does Invictus Games.
Right.
So it really, that 2007 Paul G. Hearn Leadership Award, they say, what are you going to do with your award? Well, that's what I did with it. And I continue to serve with the AAPD because I think it's just so important that we have a variety of voices at the table. And I understand my voice as a sports voice, not so much that we're trying to do this hero thing and look what I'm accomplishing, but because our athletes travel globally. And we want to open up global markets to people with disabilities. And the Paralympic Games open those lanes up for travel, for getting people to see things differently from a different lens, and also from an economic standpoint, that if I just open my doors up to this group of people that can travel and have discretionary income to travel, then I'm going to make revenue on the other side of it.
Right.
And I would do things when I was working for the Olympic Committee, where I had a group of athletes going, Paralympic athletes going, or Paralympic eligible athletes going. They weren't Paralympians. It was part of our Paralympic experience. We get to a country, and I would specifically look for a restaurant that was not accessible.
Okay.
And I would look for that restaurant specifically in the vicinity of another restaurant that was accessible. And so this country had, I would say, 7 years to prepare for the Olympic athletes coming into town. And I would walk the entire group over, sometimes 20 people over to that one restaurant that was not accessible. I had my little, Visa card, and I would say, hey, can you accommodate our group for the night? And they would look at us, saw me with my little Visa card there, and they saw money because the Olympics just happened, and now they're in a down market because they're trying to get the restaurant to have patrons. And as soon as they were started to go and the manager was trying to figure it out, I was like, oh, you know what? This restaurant over here is totally accessible. They prepared for the games. We thought your restaurant was prepared for the Paralympic Games. Obviously, you're not prepared. We're going to go over here. And I would take it right in their face, right over to the other restaurant to show the economic power of this place.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've heard some pretty staggering numbers about the disposable income of individuals who are disability, and worldwide it's in the billions.
Right.
So if businesses aren't thinking about how to be inclusive of all individuals, they're really leaving money on the table.
They're leaving a lot of money on the table. And I think it's higher than billions.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, in your time with the USOC, do you have any stories, or does anyone stick out in your mind as being a person who has really kind of embodied what it means to join the disability community?
Yeah, it's I'm not sure if one person sticks out. I think the entire movement itself is a force, could be a force multiplier. There are a lot of things I learned for sure with leadership and trying to, who are we going to be? And they decided, and that's kind of one reason why I'm not with the Olympic Committee any longer, because they have divested in grassroots building and focused on the elite level of sport. Which is, that's great, but I'm a grassroots person, so just what the alignment just wasn't there any longer.
Sure.
And I think just this week, or last Friday, I think it was, they have disbanded all the Paralympic sport clubs that we built across the United States to try to give entry points for kids with disabilities to use a nomenclature, a model of Paralympics to be, if you see the symbol, you know that this is a pathway to Paralympic sport. And so that, everybody got to turn all their badges in now their logos in by like May, I think it is, when I saw the note. So which is a shame because, we're not like the Olympics, whereas a youth who is, I'm out here with my son right now helping his track team. They have line of sight. I can pull up videos. I can show here's a hurdler at the Olympic class level. And I can't do that with Paralympics. It's getting better, but I can't show all those videos online to show how do you practice, how do you train. All those things are not there, so you have to build them.
Right.
And it's a very young organization. I mean, Paralympics in general, 1960. The Modern Olympic Games, started in 1896 with Pierre de Coubertin. So that's a over 100-year start on us, right? And that's a so you got to build it, and there's no way around it, or else you're cherry picking. And the cherry picking is great when the cherries are good, Yeah. But if you're only utilizing your national governing bodies of sport and trying to bring the national governing bodies of sport, and we know that not every national governing body of sport wants to take on what they think is a burden of athletes with disabilities. Because we see that they are treated different in different NGBs. So sometimes you got to take that stuff in-house and run it yourself. Or if you force another NGB to take it that really doesn't want it, you're doing a disservice to those athletes who are coming through.
Yeah.
Because they want to compete at the highest level and they're not getting the attention that they deserve. And you see like sled hockey, they've done phenomenal, right? It's amazing. Because sled hockey is underneath USA Hockey. And hockey embraced them. And you see now they've won 3 in a row.
Yep. Yeah. I'm a hockey mom, and my kids do practice right outside the USA Hockey facility here in Colorado Springs. And sled hockey certainly is a sport that has been fully embraced, and with youth as well, where, kids as young as 8 are being introduced and playing games against sled hockey teams. And they've done a phenomenal job, in my opinion.
Phenomenal job.
Yeah.
Same thing with USA Triathlon.
Yes.
So it's integrated, right? The fully integrated. So why can't a USA track and field do the same thing?
Yeah.
I mean, they have the championships to probably be in Eugene, Oregon. It's always in Eugene.
Sure.
And they always have a rest day. We don't take up that much space as far as Paralympics to choose team selection. So it should be just on the rest day, run the Paralympic trials. It'd be great, right? Because people love seeing the Paralympic athletes, and they do think they're kind of become these superheroes. But then we can have another conversation of why they're not superheroes and they're just showing up and trying to compete the same way that these other non-disabled athletes are competing.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us more about that. Why aren't Paralympian superheroes?
Well, okay. So it's like you go to one. We often will place on other people what we believe they can or cannot do, which is based upon what we believe we could or could not do if we were in their situation. And so, therefore, if I see a person with a disability and I don't think they should be able to compete, then I'm blown away when they actually do it. And I mislabel them as this, oh my gosh, they're incredible, they're superhuman, but they're just showing up just like anybody else. We don't call anybody else superhuman like that in the non-disabled world. If somebody runs a great time or is on the track and they went out to eat, or we don't say, oh, so great to see you out here.
Sure.
Right? Yeah, I was hungry. I needed to get some food. So I was supposed to starve in my apartment. So, it's those type of things that we misassociate. And so what we have to do is get past that wow factor and get to, now that I've seen this, what am I actually looking at and what do I need to actually truly amplify? And that is that people with disabilities really want to be treated no different than anyone else. There might be some special accommodations, but there's nothing pretty much intellectually that's wrong with that individual.
Right.
And so sometimes people will see they'll come across a person who is hard of hearing who is deaf, right? And so instead of trying to either write it out on a napkin or try to, whatever the communication might be from a non-disabled to a deaf person, right? A person that can't hear. And I've seen this happen on airplanes where the deaf person will say, please speak up, I'm deaf. And then you got the gate aide or the flight attendant, yelling at the person.
Yep.
I mean, that's they can't hear.
Right.
So you have to find a different way to communicate, and they communicate with you. That has nothing to do with intellect at all. And so we misappropriate those things onto other individuals, and when they surpass what we think is possible for them, we mislabel them as superhuman.
Right. What can we do to kind of, as a society, to mitigate that?
I think it's to continue to have dialogue and conversation around disability and make it a normal conversation. So when we talk about the high level, the 30,000-foot level from Washington, D.C. inside the Beltway, and we're talking about it from disability's perspective, I can truly own my disability. I don't want you to call it something different. I don't want to become differently abled, because if I'm differently abled, then you're saying that my disability, there's something wrong with it, and I'm more normal. And what's normal? Normal, well, then normal for them looks like me, right? Normal is non-disabled. So this is what we want to get you to. You should be able to walk again. We're going to applaud you for walking when you get out of that wheelchair. Well, the wheelchair is designed not to confine. The wheelchair is designed to is there to liberate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're not confined to a wheelchair. We're liberated. We can actually move faster and get around quicker because of the wheelchair. So that's the corrective language that we have to begin using. And when we start saying that, when I say in my speeches, non-disabled community, well, why'd you say that? Because at some point you're probably going to become disabled. But I can no more disassociate myself from being a disabled individual than I can of identifying as an African American male. Right? So I don't, and I get it. There are different parts of the world that we choose, or the language is different. So for example, in France, or in France or Italy or something like that, the article is actually placed before the noun, right? So I wouldn't say the blue shirt. I would say the shirt blue.
Okay.
Well, the noun comes before the article, right?
Right.
So I would say the shirt blue. So I get how language can change a little bit with the dynamic of how people show up. But in America, in the English language, I wouldn't put that before, because if I did, if I was identifying myself or a friend was introducing me to their friend, they would say, "Let me introduce you to my black friend John." We wouldn't say that.
No.
Right. In England, or not England, but in Europe, the article, the color would come before the person. We don't say that here.
Right.
We say we wouldn't, and I would say I wouldn't even want to
recognize
identify as that. Right.
Yeah.
So why would I say we wouldn't say let me introduce to my disabled friend Tom or my disabled friend Peter. We wouldn't do that. And so what we're saying, if we're saying we don't want to use the term disability, is we want to throw away how that person might be identified in kind of normal society as an identifier. I would rather a person say to me, "Let me introduce you to my friend John." If John's an amputee, let me introduce you to my friend John.
Sure.
If my friend John is blind, let me introduce you to my friend John.
Yep.
Right? And so we always want to say, what's the politically correct thing to do? Just introduce them as a person.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
It's so easy, right? We don't have to think about all the other things.
Yeah.
But we are such a label-driven society that I have to say something, and do I have the correct label right?
Yeah. Huh.
Just say the person's name.
So you mentioned briefly your speeches. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do currently and what that looks like for the disability community?
Oh, yeah. It's just a global thing. So now people asked me, "John, how'd you overcome your amputation?" And when I thought about it, I'll make a long story shorter, is I didn't overcome the amputation of my left leg, which led to this whole kind of philosophical shift of what then did I overcome? Because I don't believe we overcome what people identify us as overcoming, or what we might identify as overcoming. What we overcome is the negative stigma that is associated with what we think we've overcome.
Sure.
The fears that we may have because of that stigma, and the limitations of what we believe we can actually accomplish because of that stigma. And the second thing is other people's stigmas, other people trying to put us into their boxes to make themselves feel better about our disability. So like I said before, other people believing for us what we can or cannot do, which is based upon what they believe they could or could not do if they were in our situation. And then societal fears or societal stigmas. Who did I allow in? Who did I allow into my brain to make me believe that I was less than, that my wife might not stick around, that my son might not see me the same way, that I was going to lose my job? Who told me these things? What in society had I listened to that made me believe these? And then, in the company, what we talk about is turning away from that. And we can only do that and combat fear with facts. So we have to begin to look at what is factual about a situation rather than what our emotional state is because of it. Because if I was to overcome the amputation of my left leg, I'd have my leg back.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That's not happening. That's not there. So therefore, that's in the past. 1994 is when the accident happened. There's a lot of water underneath the bridge. So I'm not getting that back. So there must be something else that I must have overcome. And I believe that if I get my life back, if I just get back to who I was, then everything will be fine. And that's in our rebuilding process. We think we're rebuilding, but I don't have my leg. How can I get back to that state? Too much water's passed. Too much time has passed. So in that space, I don't realize that I'm actually redefining myself. And when I'm redefining myself off a wrong premise. And that false premise is going back to the other people that are believing for me what I can or cannot do. Or there might be a few people that have walked the path before me that are saying you can make it to the other side. You can become this other individual. It's not about your leg. It's about your freedom. And in any case, in that redefining moment, I have to make a choice. And that choice is whether or not I'm going to succumb to my friends or the other people's fears and stigmas and go slide backwards into my own fear, or am I going to choose what it is in my life of those fears that I'm going to actually amputate to embrace this new normal mindset? And the new normal is a rebirth. It's not a rebuild at all. Because when I have now with my artificial leg, I have to learn how to walk again, run again, show up in society again, look at the stigma of other people again differently. And so all these things I'm learning, I'm beginning to get stronger in because I'm being reborn in this space. And when I get strong enough, then I am resolute. I have a resolve about myself, and no longer am I going to go back to what the other people are thinking. They need to catch up to where I am. And then that, when you get to that space, that totally equals your freedom, your liberation. But the liberation is not for us. The liberation is actually to free somebody else that's in their fears. So the business, our Communications International, we help people, companies, businesses amputate their fear to embrace their new normal.
Wow. So if our listeners wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that, John?
Easy. JohnRegister.com. JohnRegister.com is one. If you want to follow me on the gram that is, it's at John F. Register, at John F. Register. And then I am relaunching my YouTube channel, which is, I think you just go to YouTube and type in John Register. You'll find me there as well. So longer pieces there, shorter pieces definitely on Instagram.
Yeah.
And then if you want to book John Register or one of our speakers, you can go to JohnRegister.com to start that process.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all that in our show notes, and I do follow you on the gram, and I really enjoy watching you travel throughout the country and the world, and the difference that you're making. And I just really applaud you for that, and thank you for being a friend of the Rocky Mountain ADA Center.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, John, thank you so very much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Adventures in Accessibility. Tune in next time for another dive into the unknown.
Adventures in Accessibility is hosted by Dana Barton, produced by Emily Schumann, and Mike Shea is our sound engineer. This podcast is a project of the Rocky Mountain ADA Center and is funded under a grant from the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. Grant number 90DP0094-01-00. This production is intended solely for entertainment and informal guidance and should not be considered legal advice. The opinions expressed by guests are not necessarily held or endorsed by the Rocky Mountain ADA Center.